Hello. Thank you for joining our presentation today, Fundraising Events, Building the Cornerstone for the House of Development. The House of Development is a concept developed by Cogio to illustrate the building blocks of a successful organization and explain why development is so crucial to fundraising, recruiting, and achieving your organization's goals. Before we get started, just a few quick things. We're going to be taking questions at the end. If you're viewing through desktop, you can submit questions through the chat option on the right of the GoToWebinar interface. If you have dialed in, you will not be able to submit questions, but you are more than welcome to contact us after the presentation. My name is Jen Wells, and I'm the Creative Director at TAP Network. I'll be speaking a little bit at the end of the presentation when we get into technology for fundraising events. But for now, I'm going to introduce you to our main speaker, Rob Kusel. Rob is the Managing Director at Cogio. Cogio has 40+ years of development and organizational management experience, raising over $600 million for more than 100 nonprofit organizations. As the Managing Director, Rob provides organizational advice and development services to nonprofits to optimize their efficiency and long-term sustainability. Rob has worked with organizations such as Essex and Drake Fundraising Council, Blue Oak School, Stanford University, and his own alma mater, Williams College, among others. Now that you know who we are, I'm going to hand it off to Rob to get started.
Thank you, Jen. As Jen mentioned, today we're looking at retail, which is events. And so we're going to be discussing in great depth events and their purpose. So why don't we go to the third slide? Again, this will just remind you that there are 10 sessions. This is the third. And if we go to the fourth slide, the goals and context for today. As part of learning how to build an effective house of development or being an effective mason bricklayer, you've got to have best practices to ensure your organization's future and sustainable. So events can be a cornerstone of retail fundraising. And then Jen will discuss how clean and organized data and systems fuel the rest of the smart home. The following slide, if you've been to other webinars, you've seen this slide. It's the house. And the foundation of the house, which is the first floor, is the retail. It comprises annual and membership giving potentially, as well as events. So today, we're focusing on events. The next webinar will be focused on annual giving and membership giving. So what type of, the following slide, what type of events? There are many types. And those that we see most often are listed here. And they're gala, signature events, and we'll talk in detail about what comprises a true signature event. Breakfast call to actions, which are very effective for a particular sector of the industry. Fun runs or walks and thon events, golf tournaments and other such tournaments, cultivation events, open houses, campaign launch events, as well as campaign completion events, celebrations. Next slide, number 7. Why are events important? Well, they're important for many reasons. The first and most obvious is building public awareness of the organization and its mission in the communities it serves. It can serve to attract new members, as in donors, and also can be a great cultivational tool for board members, potential board members. You can attract new and incremental donors and gather data intelligence around those donors for future leverage. It's a great way to cultivate current, new, and prior donors. Participation of new and incremental volunteers gives you an opportunity to engage existing folks as well as incremental folks. Events, if they're well planned, will have a return on investment. Therefore, they will help you meet your budgetary needs by raising incremental funds. And it'll be if, in fact, you're trying to present a new brand or a new image or new programs, events can be a great opportunity to widen the knowledge and education about that. It's also a great way to build internal community in terms of the satisfaction of pulling off a great event. Really helps the agency thrive. And it also allows you to build external partnerships in a creative way. It helps you advance your marketing and PR, which is very opportune. And it also gives you an annual opportunity to honor, to thank, to recognize key individuals who have made a difference to your agency in that year. And it's a social event, which can be a lot of fun as well. The following slides, events can be challenging. And again, there are many reasons. Those that we see the most are timing, right? Competitive events. So you need to understand what the event calendar is in your community or in your city to see what the competition is and to make sure that the timing of your event is good. Resources, getting resources can be challenging. The proper leadership can be also a challenge. Properly training volunteers and ensuring that there's true quality assurance around what they're doing, we know is challenging. Soliciting stuff for the event is always a challenge. Making sure that the invitations and that the guests that you want to have there are properly approached. Making sure that you're keeping a proper budget year to year for the event, as well as, and Jen will touch on this, record keeping and databases and the critical nature of that year to year. What's the decision-making structure? Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Where are the subcommittees for the event, and how does that work as a whole? How is the communication flow for the event over the course of, in particular, preparing for the event and the execution of the event? What is your donor volunteer recognition? Is it satisfying enough? Are there things that are being done that are really important and rewarding? And then is there enough strategic planning and goal setting around the event in terms of return on investment in particular? And then is the event sustainable? Can you do it every year at the same time so that it becomes essentially something that the community looks forward to? So these are generally some of the challenges that we see on year to year. Now, here's the big existential question. Are events worth your time as an agency? Or are you having too many events that aren't producing the proper return on investment, that are too resource intensive? Now, the 10th slide is fascinating because it really does a good job outlining industry trends among small nonprofits with budgets under 5 million, and those are represented in blue, as well as medium-sized nonprofits, which are 5 to 50 million, and then large 501c3s, which are over 50 million in budget. And you can see the x-axis is the ROI, return on investment. And then the vertical axis, the y-axis, is ease of planning of the event. And it seems like it's like a supply and demand line. There's a correlation between how hard it is to plan and how much money you're raising, which doesn't surprise us at all. But you'll also note that the types of events being planned don't vary dramatically across the industry, and certainly depending on size, which is also very interesting. And obviously, the source of this is Nonprofit Research Collaborative, and there's a link. You can see other stuff there as well. And then the big number is that over 3/4 of 501c3s do an event, host some kind of fundraising event, 82%. I'm not sure what year this data was gathered, but it's probably pretty recent. Next slide really talks about best practices for all types of events. And there are really 3 macro areas that need to be examined. And we're going to look at 4 different case studies next, where we'll discuss that in detail because we really believe in subjective examples. So what are those 3 macro areas? No surprise. The first is the event preparation phase. And here you want a really dynamic team, strong, organized individuals who together will really make a difference in terms of the culture of the event, how the event is presented, how the event is executed, and how the event is evaluated, as well as stewarded. Now, there are really 2 types of volunteers, and this is most evident in independent day schools. And the 2 types of volunteers that we find are either the true altruists who are performing the task of volunteerism really for the benefit of the agency. And then there's the dangerous volunteers, and these emerge in special events, particularly in galas. And those are volunteers who are there for ego replenification because they want to show off or get something out of it, some benefit. They missed their day job, that they had a high-performing job, and they want to substitute working or leading an event. And unfortunately, we see too many such volunteers, particularly in independent day schools. So be very careful in terms of making sure that your leadership team, particularly if it's volunteer-based, is genuinely altruistic and in it for the right reasons, that they're not bringing an ulterior agenda to the table. And that can be easily assessed and vetted as you build your leadership team. We also strongly recommend, if you can, to have a staff member, at least part-time, manage the process, because as Jen will be covering later on, the data piece of any event is really, really critical in terms of data management. So there needs to be an internal person who will aggressively take care of CRMs, data, but Jen will touch on that later, but that's also very important. The second part for event preparation are committed donors, sponsors, and underwriters of the event, and hopefully on an annual, year-to-year basis. And again, through the case studies, which we're going to review next, we'll speak specifically about how that works and what that means. The third, we're using the word committed, substitute in for committed for altruistic, but truly volunteers that are going to volunteer their time for all the right reasons. And those being that it is to raise a lot of money for the agency who is hosting the event. And then finally, event preparation should include a very detailed investigation of how you're going to manage your data. And it's critical, if not the most important thing, because if you're going to be successful on a year-to-year basis, that needs to be incredibly detailed. And it'll also be very important for the stewardship of the event, which is to say, as you obtain committed donors, sponsors, and underwriters, the most important work you'll do with them is after the event, in the 11 and a half months between the events, in the stewardship that will occur. So those are the key areas to think about for the event preparation phase. In terms of the event execution, there can't be any nebulism at all in the execution. So everything needs to be outlined literally minute to minute. Now, this may sound anal, but it's really the best business practice. And also in terms of planning for the event, there should be a reverse timeline that really goes out literally 11 and a half months, beginning with the execution of the event, and then the stewardship, and then all the things that need to occur. And we'll get to that again in the case studies. So what are the event execution? As I said, a detailed schedule and scripts, literally minute to minute, on what's going to happen and who's going to ensure that it occurs. So whether it's somebody giving a speech, whether a small short movie that might be shown, whether it's the flow of the silent auction and the live auction, making sure that the auction, all the stuff that is absolutely critical for the flow of an event. Where are the volunteers positioned, everything. And then make sure, in terms of a component of the event having some kind of donor and volunteer recognition, if pertinent. And here, our advice is this. If your agency is not currently handing out an annual community award or some kind of agency-based award, you really should consider it. Because what that does, particularly in a major gift setting, is bring their when you honor them, they'll be there. And obviously, you will want them to invite all their friends, namely their network, and therefore you'll have access to potentially incremental new friends. And we also recommend that you do the honoring of the annual during your annual event or one of your events, and the one that makes the most sense. The third macro area is the event evaluation phase, probably the most important, because this is what will differentiate you from other 501c3s in your area who are also doing events and who are also seeking funds, most likely from similar sources. And so the way to really differentiate yourself, and I'm going to give a subjective example right now, is in donor stewardship. So for example, we helped run an annual gala for an independent school in California. And one of the things we instructed them to do as they were soliciting lots in the Napa Valley, this was a Napa-based school, to the wineries, the minute that they secured a commitment or a fax came in from a winery, they immediately picked up the phone and called their contact to thank them. And that was such a differentiator in the Valley, where everybody in Napa Valley, where everyone, all the 501c3s are soliciting the same wineries, but none of them are probably doing that practice. And we found out later that indeed it was a huge differentiator. So be aggressive on stewardship, because that will make a big difference in how you're perceived in terms of your donors, whether they're in-kind gifts or monetary gifts. Volunteers. Don't assume that volunteers had a great time at the event. Make sure you poll them, make sure you steward them, make sure you really help them with help you with their evaluation of the event, and help them understand how to do that in a very organized way. And then you want to be absolutely overt in terms of understanding what the evaluations were and what needs to be fixed or improved or considered for the following year if you're doing an annual event. The data, obviously, all the data needs to be collected and put into the proper CRM area, as well as reports. Once you've got everything in your CRM, you want to create event reports to understand what exactly occurred, how much money was raised, where was it raised, were there changes year to year in a particular area? For example, did the silent auction raise as much this year as last year? Where were the best ROIs, return on investment areas? And that's where you tweak a little bit. So you're constantly evaluating through financial reports, essentially, on events. Okay, well, let's have some fun now and look at some case studies. What we did was this. We chose a city where we have done a lot of work, and we identified 4 501Cs, which are well known, with which we've done this work, ironically, and each of these events is very in tune with what we just discussed. Okay, so slide number 12 is the Meals on Wheels San Francisco, and it's their annual mid-May Star Chefs and Vintners Gala, which they hold. And the event, let me describe it. It's essentially a 2-hour event, and it has food prepared by the best chefs in the Bay Area, led by Cindy Paulson. If you're a foodie, you'll know who she is, and Thomas Keller, as well as pouring some of the greatest wines in the world, which they've acquired through relationships, through the chefs. And then they have 3 things going on: a silent auction, a raffle, a big raffle, I'll describe it in a second, as well as a monstrous live auction. Now, the silent auction is there only because many of their donors like it, and the lots are very, very good for a silent auction, mostly food and wine. The live auction is spectacular because what they've done, they've been doing this event now for 12 years, so they know their audience extremely well, and they know what their audience likes. And over the 12 years, they've aggregated some of the wealthiest people in the Bay Area in terms of connections to this event. So it's now a must-be event for many people in the Bay Area on an annual basis. And so the lots really reflect the affinity of the donors in terms of travel, very high-scale travel, as well as food and wine. And that's really important in terms of that. The raffle is through a relationship they have with BMW Mini of San Francisco, who is committed to providing a nice vehicle every year as their contribution. And they sell a limited number of tickets at a very high cost. So it's not your typical raffle where there's a slim chance of winning. There's actually not a great chance of winning, but a pretty good chance of winning, and it has a great ROI. They do have a full-time employee that does this because of the magnitude of the event and the scale of the event, and that's also important to know. And the event itself nets, not gross, nets 2 million plus in 2 hours. So you can understand why they have a full-time employee and why they put so much effort into this event. So how do they do this? Well, they have a full-time employee, so the leadership is strong, and their director of development has been there forever and, again, has great relationships. They've had over a decade now of donor, sponsor, and underwriter preparation. Their volunteer management is incredible, and they've got people returning year to year to help out with the event. And their data management is done on Razor's Edge Blackbaud and flawless. As I mentioned before, their execution is always flawless. It's really donor-centric, very few speeches. One person gets honored, generally a large donor. And again, it's all about having fun and really connecting with your peers, and basically an afternoon or late afternoon of debauchery. And that's what it is, because that's what their volunteers want. In terms of the evaluation, again, for 11 and a half months thereafter, that's what they're doing, because they also know that they need to reacquire most of the stuff that they got the previous year. So there's really good donor stewardship at the highest level. The volunteer stewardship is equally strong. They're very stringent about getting as many evaluations as possible from the event, from donors, as well as vendors, as well as chefs, as well as anybody who could make an impact on the event. And then they're very good with data and reports. Now, what they're really after, however, because they're able to attract very, very wealthy individuals, are incremental donors. And the goal of the event is, to raise a lot of money, but really to get people cultivated and educated and then prepared for a major gift or campaign ask. So that's Meals on Wheels. This is what we call a signature event. Now, why? What's the mission of Meals on Wheels? Providing meals twice a day, as well as other auxiliary services to homebound seniors in the county of San Francisco, of which there are too many. And that, by the way, that supply of homebound seniors is growing astronomically year to year. So their services are constantly in demand. And so Star Chefs and Vintner, we're talking food, right? That really is their mission. So it's so mission centric in terms of being a signature event that it just made total sense. So why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, you might know Health Right 360 as Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics. And it was a merger of Walden House, which was a shelter for women, and drug abuse rehab. They merged with Walden House and became Health Right 360. They're now a family of other programs. They've been merging in other 501c3s because of the ACA, which is, they've done very well with financially, whereas others have struggled. So, and by the way, this type of event works very well for social service agencies who are making an impact in their community through their social service work. Now, Health Right 360 literally takes ex-cons and prisoners and brings them back in society in LA. That's what they do down in Los Angeles. And in the Bay Area, San Francisco and San Diego, they help with rehab and reentry, professional reentry services. These are adults, so it's not an easy population to quote unquote sell in development. But this particular group has done a really great job. and it's culminating of the opening of their new headquarters in downtown San Francisco, and we raised $22.5 million for that, which was 15 million, which was a huge success for them. They consolidated all their operations into one 30,000 square foot facility, and if you're ever in San Francisco, be sure to visit it. It is really, really nice. For example, what this facility did, for example, is that it allowed their clients to have dental care for the first time, which is transformational for job searches. So what they do is an annual breakfast, and they promise to have you start by 8 o'clock, and you will be out of the room by 9. They do it at a fancy, in the ballroom of a hotel, the Ritz-Carlton or the Intercontinental, and it's just a great event. So how does it work? They have one person who spends 5% of her time managing this event, and it's really just acquiring table captains. And so they try and get 26 table captains every year. The table captains are responsible for bringing 7 people to their table for tables of 8. And it's your classic what was once called a Benevon event, except with HealthRight, they're incredibly strong on following up after the event in a major gift context. So what's the structure of the event? 1 hour, that's it. Everybody's seated, table captain welcomes their guests. And then the chairman of the board of directors gets up, she welcomes everybody, and then introduces an MC, in this case, an anchorman, Dan Ashley, Channel 7, who does a few self-deprecating jokes and then introduces the executive director. The executive director then gives the state of the agency in a minute and then says, okay, everybody, let's watch the movie. And they show a movie of their clients, explaining 3 clients, and they each explain how their lives were saved. Right? It's a complete tearjerker. Then the clients are actually in the room because they've been trained the night before. We bring them to the hotel and have them stay overnight to make sure that they will give their speech perfectly. So they rehearse, and until they're perfect, they can't go to dinner, literally. And then they give their speeches. It's incredible because we just saw them on video, and now they're there, and it's just incredible. And then another MC comes up, makes an ask, and tells everybody. And then the table captain hands out all the forms and pencils and pledge forms, and then pledges are made. And every year they raise about $300,000 in an hour. Just very simple, with big ROI and a very simple event. Recommend that format for that type of agency. The next slide, number 15, is another well-known, it's Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And this was, again, they did a capital campaign for a new facility, and they were very successful. This is a campaign, this was an event to celebrate that campaign closeout. So the idea was to do a parade, to include clients in the parade and have dignitaries. And the new center is located on Market Street, close to Van Ness. So the idea was to launch the parade at City Hall on Van Ness, and then to march down to the new headquarters, and then to do a ribbon cutting, and then some speeches by the mayor and others, dignitaries, and really just have fun and celebrate the event, which was the celebration of the campaign, successful campaign. And again, it allowed to bring in a number of key influencers. We were able to celebrate and identify key volunteers. It was, in terms of the schedule and the scripts, it was really, really good because people, again, had been thoroughly prepared. The parade execution was flawless because so much time went into the preparation. And in short, it was just a great event. But note, in this case, there was no discussion of raising any money. I think I missed a slide, Jen. I apologize. We went by slide number 13. Let's go back to slide 13. The last case study, and then Jen's going to take over and talk about data for the last 15 minutes or so, is a really good cultivation event. This is a soccer academy client of ours, again, in San Francisco. And their goal is to ensure that any player has the ability, should be able to play in the academy. So any girl or boy who lives in the city of San Francisco, and there are some poor areas, by the way, some very poor areas, and generally that's where some of the best players live. So it's really a matter of economic opportunity. So for them, it was really financial aid, raising money around financial aid. And they have a segment of their population that is very wealthy, and we know that through data analysis. And so what was done here really are a series of cultivation events that really is very simple format. It's finding a current parent of a player or two who will host an event at their home. So think 5:30 to 7 in a home or somewhere, place of business or restaurant, and you invite a number of other interested parties. You have a very simple agenda, which is 2 or 3 speeches, a description of what the near-term goals of the agency are, in this case, the club, and really an explanation that we will be following up with each of you after the event. That we're not here to ask you for money, but rather just explain to you what we're doing, where we're going, and how important development is for the club. So we did a number of those in their first year of operation. It was very successful. They raised over $90,000. In the second year, we made it so that there was a mandatory meeting for any new parent at the beginning of the season. And so that was very successful, and did another few cultivation events. And that year, in the second year, they raised over $150,000. In year 3, we got they hit a jackpot. There was a couple that came who had a child played and knew, and it turned out they were running a fairly large foundation, a very private foundation, family run. And 3 meetings later, we were allowed to submit a proposal, and they were awarded a $500,000 grant over 5 years, so $100,000 a year. So that was transformational. So again, a very successful program through a very simple series of cultivation events. And then the stewardship after the event, again, it was really setting up meetings with anybody who had been there to talk about engaging in the campaign. And a quick note on thons before you take over, Jen. Those are very effective for, particularly for sports groups. Again, large sports organizations. On November 2nd, for example, there will be two soccer-thons, one in Springfield, Missouri, the large club, and then another in Lincoln, Nebraska, with Villarreal, Nebraska. And these, again, are 12 or 14-hour thons where you involve many, many players who will raise money by the hour. And you can raise a lot of money. And it's very signature because it's really the mission, right? They're doing their sport, they're engaging, and people are coming to watch. So those are very effective as long as it's mission centric. So I'll stop there. Jen is now going to talk about data and the importance of data.
Thanks, Rob. Whoops. So I am going to talk about data. I'm also going to talk about event marketing technology. We've been doing a lot of event marketing in the past year or so with TAP. So I've got a ton of tools. I'm going to try not to overwhelm you with the details of each program that we use, but lots of different tools and techniques and ideas for you to take home. So following Rob's kind of outline of preparation and then execution, for the preparation stage, the very first thing is to set up your event registration. And we use Eventbrite for just about everything because it's the best tool that we've found. There are plenty of other ways to set up registration. You can do it through your own website, lots of other tools. But the reason we like Eventbrite is it's the easiest way we found to collect registrations, payments, and it integrates well with other systems like Facebook events. Facebook, I would say it's not, this shouldn't be the central location for your event registration because not everyone's on there, but just about everyone is. It's like 90% of our population uses Facebook. So it's a good way to market. And it also, because it integrates with Eventbrite, people can sign up for tickets right through the Facebook interface without ever having to leave, which is helpful because each time you ask someone to click, then you're that much more likely to lose them before they make it to the end result. And then I have to mention GoToWebinar because it's another great system and it's the one we're using today. For webinars specifically, I would say GoToWebinar has a little bit of a learning curve with the interface, but once you get past that, it's one of the best and most widely used systems. Once you've got your registration set up, then it's time to start promoting the event. And the tools we use for that, typically email. Email has some of the highest conversion rates for events. This is kind of where data collection comes in. We use HubSpot, and that's because it does so much in one place. It's a CRM, which is customer relationship management. It will, as people sign up, it will keep track of those people. It will keep track of what events they've signed up for, what emails they've received, whether they've opened those emails, like all the details that you can think of that you need to keep track of. It's not the only CRM, there's plenty out there, but it's one of the best ones for also including features for email, social media posting, landing pages, forms, and on and on and on. Some of my other recommendations for people who can't necessarily afford HubSpot: MailChimp. This is really great for email. It's a little bit simpler, cleaner. It doesn't necessarily have quite as much data on your contacts. You can make your own custom fields if you want to keep track of things that aren't just basic name and email, but it doesn't go into as much depth as an actual CRM. And then I didn't want to make it sound like those are the only email systems. So some of the other favorites are ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact, MailerLite, ConvertKit. And deciding which one to use can be a little bit overwhelming, but generally just making a list of the features that you need and then deciding what your budget is the best way to go about that. For social media scheduling, which again is so crucial to your events because you need to get the word out there, you need to be posting on social media, you need to be sharing that registration link everywhere you possibly can. Again, I have to mention HubSpot because it does everything and it also links everything together. So in addition to keeping track of the data for your attendees, it allows you to create campaigns, which links your different promotion methods together. So the emails that you send out, the social media, the landing forms, the pages, it will show you your analytics for all those things in one place, which makes it really easy to see like, oh, this was more successful than this, and what can we do differently next time? If HubSpot is not your thing, SmarterQueue is another great option that we use for some of our clients, and it even has a couple of cool features that HubSpot does not have. It lets you kind of cycle through posts, and it lets you set a posting schedule instead of having to set the exact date and time for each post, which I find to be very useful. Some other options to consider: Sprout Social, Buffer, Hootsuite. And again, there's a ton. There used to be a lot of free options, but a lot of different tools are getting rid of their freemium version. So it's getting to the point now where you're pretty much going to have to pay for a scheduler, but it's 100% worth it. And I recommend trying to go on social media every day and post wastes so much of your time, which is actually my next point. This is less technology and more how to more efficiently use your technology. And that's to create a posting plan. So think about the types of content you're going to be sharing, whether that's going to be promoting the different speakers at your event, promoting different workshops, learning points, or even just the couple of weeks leading up, like giving logistics so people know where to go and that they remember that the event's happening that week. So coming up with the different types of content and then deciding how often you're going to post it. And you can even get it all scheduled and queued up in advance so that you're not trying to do it all on the day of, because trying to remember to get on Twitter every other day to post links is a pain in the butt, whereas getting it all scheduled at once will save you a ton of time. The Media Kit is another tool that we use, and that's for your partners and sponsors. Because the more people you have involved in an event, the bigger reach you can get on social, through email, through lots of different channels. But if people aren't given instructions or like a clear idea of what to post and how, they're less likely to get involved. So the simplest thing you can do is create some kind of universal event graphic, like a save the date, with the event information on it. Send it to your partners with the registration link and your event hashtag. Hashtag is important, and I will explain more on that in a minute. give them the exact information that they need to post and just ask them to share it on all of their social media channels. If you don't have partners who are very tech savvy, you can go one step simpler than that and just ask them to follow you on social media, give them your handles, make it easy as possible. Please share the links to this. And just that one little action by them is going to get you much more reach and more impressions for your posts. Technology for event execution. So when people first get to the event, you're going to need to check them in. And if you've used Eventbrite for registrations, this is going to be super simple because you can just get the app, whether that's on your phone or on an iPad or laptop. The app lets you search through names and just click a check mark, and then they've marked as attended. The reason this is important is when you send your follow-ups later, you know what's going to be relevant to which people. So you're going to follow up with the people who actually attended, and maybe there's going to be one call to action for that, but the people who didn't attend will be something slightly different. Or it might be something as simple as the language. Thank you for attending versus sorry we missed you. But being able to track who has actually attended and who hasn't is important. For, I say presentations, but this is more, I guess, a display. Everwall is a really cool tool that tracks those event hashtags that I mentioned. What it will do is display all of the social media posts that use the hashtag from different channels, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, or wherever. And that gives attendees an easy way to look up, see who's posting, who's engaged with the event, and it also gives you a way to track analytics later. For promotion during the event itself, for live social media posts, there's a few different tools you can use. If you're going to live stream, we really like something called a Mevo. It's basically a camera that we can set on a tripod, but it has a really cool swivel. It's round. It has great audio, and it will automatically focus on presenters' faces. It lets you upload your live stream to any of the major social media networks, Facebook, Instagram, or you can just save it to the memory card and then do something with it later. If you don't want to use, you don't want to buy equipment for your event, phones. Most people have smartphones. It's not, as long as you have a reasonably updated phone, you should be able to download social media apps and do it that way. The only thing to note is that live streaming will really eat up your data. So make sure your venue has Wi-Fi and make sure that you're on it before you start doing this. If you don't want to live stream, there's so many other things you can do. You can just share images, posts. I think it's really great to just do quotes and snippets from the presentations so that the people who didn't attend can see what they missed and they can plan to come next year. The event hashtag, I'm going to mention that again. You want to make sure you use this every time you post because it's really going to help you analyze later how many posts went out, how people reacted to it, and then see what did or did not work. Oh, and then the other thing is the speaker handles. So anyone who's involved with the event, and that's speakers, sponsors, anyone that you want to mention or thank, use their social media, tag them so that they see that you thanked them. Like Rob was saying, the importance of making people feel appreciated. And then also because that's extra exposure if they happen to share that. Evaluation after the event. This is where some of those things with analytics and hashtags are really going to come in handy. But I guess the very first thing you want to do is get feedback from people directly in their own words. And one of our favorite tools for that is SurveyMonkey. It's easy to set up. It's easy to send out. People are familiar with it, so they're not going to be scared to fill out the form. You can also set up forms through Google Docs or your website or a bunch of other tools, but SurveyMonkey is the one I would usually recommend just because it's so simple. Usually we send out a feedback form when we're thanking our attendees for coming because the event is still top of mind, and if they just finished the event and they had a great time, they're most likely to fill it out and give you feedback. If you wait a week or two, then you're not likely to get many responses. For analytics, when I was talking about campaigns in HubSpot, that's where this really comes in. So if you have set up your campaign and you've tagged it, this will show you all of the different contacts, all of the registrants, the people who attended, the people who didn't attend. It will tell you what actions they took, what emails they opened, what they read. It will even, in some cases, like landing pages, tell you where the majority of people spent a lot of time. So you can see like, oh, people made it through this page and then they got stuck at the form. Maybe our form's too long. Maybe it has too many fields. If people read the emails and didn't sign up, then you know, okay, there's some kind of barrier here that we need to address. And then I guess the point of all of those things, getting feedback and tracking your analytics, is so that you can continue to improve. Not to rehash the previous remarks too much, but there's not a whole lot of point in tracking things if you're not going to use that data in some sort of meaningful way. So we typically put together presentations after events that show which promotion tactics were effective, and then we summarize ideas for things to try out in future events. But even if you don't make a fancy presentation, even if you're just making notes for internal or presenting to your board, those are things that you really want to think about. Like, okay, here's what we learned, and now what? Now what will we do with this? An event that we were involved with just a couple months ago was the Women in Nonprofit Leadership Conference. This was a great event because we got to run through all of those steps that I just listed with promoting the event, being involved with the social media at the event, and then follow up afterwards. And we just recently talked through all of the ideas that we have for future events, because this is technically an annual event, but they've only done it a couple times. And each time there's that question of, are we even going to do this again? So with this, we were able to by setting a posting cadence and making sure that we were doing social media strategically and not spending lots and lots of time on it, we were able to grow their social media accounts by 175% with people following them and engaging with their content. We increased attendance by 125%. And then we got a lot of really great feedback the day of, the day after, and we got a great list of ideas for future events and also keeping people engaged, because there's not going to be as much buildup with this event if every single one is a one-off. If you have built up that network of people that are following you, you don't want to lose them each time. You want to keep them engaged. And if it's only once a year, then you need some sort of strategy to like touch base, maybe once a month at minimum, so that people remember that you're there, so that they're excited to follow up in the future, so that they're looking for that event invite when it's going to come out next time. And then I'm not going to toot our own horn too much, but I did want to talk about TAP events, because we did this TAP social series monthly for over a year. And I think that's the best example that we've had, where we did something repeatedly, we tracked the analytics, and we saw how we could make improvements. I want to go over like my main takeaways with running these events for TAP. And even though I'm supposed to be here talking about technology, I'm actually going to mention one of the things that Rob said, and that's consistency. You can assess your audience, you can agonize over what kind of format to use, you can do webinars, you can do in-person events, you can try anything in that huge list, but the best attendance and engagement you're going to get is when your events are predictable and reliable and people know when to expect them, when they're engaged and they keep following to see what's going to happen next. Second most important, again, still not technology, the partners that you have for the event. Events need to make sense or people aren't going to sign up. And increasing your audience by a huge percentage isn't going to work if they're not engaged or they're not interested in your topic. So picking partners who are a complement to your own organization or brand and who will be able to boost your efforts by increasing your audience. Or if they don't have a big audience or they don't have a big following, social media and email lists, some sort of network to reach out to, then at least have them be able to help with other resources like planning, promotion, and so on. And then my third learning point or most important thing is analytics. Going back to that database, tracking your efforts throughout the whole process, and then bringing it all together and figuring out what you learned and how you're going to improve in the future. And that is actually the end of our presentation. We have a couple of questions from viewers, but if anybody else wants to chime in, go ahead and send us something through the questions panel and GoToWebinar, or send us a chat. Rob, the first question I have is, how do we decide what type of event to host?
Yeah, Jen just mentioned that there's an opportunity for a post-event call for this. Set up a call with us, because we need to ask you specific questions about your community, about the mission, about your donor base, about all the stuff that Jen and I just talked about. So please just set up a call either through the Cogeo website or just by emailing me directly.
Okay, and then the second question is similar, so I'm not sure if it's going to be the same answer. What are some inexpensive event ideas for a nonprofit just starting out?
Again, we would really just need to know more. And I apologize, everybody, that there's not a generic answer. But I think you've understood through this 50-minute session that it's really about data and understanding what the particularities are across a number of areas, all of which were discussed today. So there is no generic answer. Again, schedule a call with us, and we're happy to chat with you and really help you figure that out, because there probably is a really good answer.
To kind of follow up with that, I think everyone likes hearing that they're unique, but then it's not quite as exciting to hear that that means they need unique solutions to their organization as well. Okay, well, that's all the questions that we had, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our webinar, and thank you so much, Rob, for speaking. That was so informative, and I feel like I learned a lot, so hopefully everyone else did too. We will be sending out a couple of follow-ups. We're going to be sending out a link to view our video library, where you can see the past webinars if you missed them, or if you want to catch future videos, we'll keep adding them there. And we also have more information on there, or we'll be sending out more information if you want to chat with Rob a little bit more, if you want to chat with me. We will also be sending out information for future webinars. This is a series, and we have quite a few more sections of the House of Development to go. So if you're interested in any of those sections, keep an eye out for our emails. You can follow TAP on social media to see posts there, or you can make sure you're signed up for our email list if you're not already. So that's it for today. We hope this is helpful, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.